Hi, it's Dr. Z. I will be discussing research methods in measuring abnormal behavior today. By the end of this video, you'll be able to describe the 4 levels of research methods: cellular, individual, group, and population, as well as the different techniques associated with them. Please feel free to pause the video at any time to take notes. Can you imagine hearing voices? But not any voices. Voices that said your sister wanted to kill you. This is what happened to child prodigy Nathaniel Ayers, who dropped out of the Juilliard School in New York after 2 years. Nathaniel's experience with schizophrenia is documented in the 2009 film The Soloist. So, how was it determined that Nathaniel was suffering with paranoid schizophrenia? There are several research methods that we use to study psychological disorders. In fact, research of abnormal behavior ranges from the cellular to the population level. As implied, research at the cellular level will explore how neurons, neurochemicals, and brain structures play a role in abnormal behavior. The nervous system and the endocrine system also influence behavior, which could lead to the development of psychological disorders. At the cellular level, the first research method is neuroimaging. This research method studies how the structure and function of the brain are impacted by abnormal behavior. There are 2 different types of imaging. CT or CAT scans and MRI assess brain structures. In this case, these techniques are snapshots of the brain from different angles. Researchers can use these images to determine if a certain part or structure of the brain is damaged or abnormal. The second type of imaging is PET scans and fMRI. The F in fMRI stands for function. In other words, these techniques assess brain function, or how certain parts of the brain are actively working. For example, in an fMRI, it measures the increases in blood flow that are associated with increases in neural activity in a certain area of the brain. This photo is an example of fMRIs of depressed patients before and after electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. These imaging scans show there's a decrease in brain connectivity before the area is lit up in orange, and then after those areas in blue, after their treatment with ECT, thereby improving depression symptoms. The second research method is behavioral genetics. This is a scientific field that examines how genetic influences on behavior, such as psychological disorders, may run in families. A key concept in behavioral genetics is heritability. Heritability is the proportion of observable differences among individuals in a particular trait that is due to genetic differences. In other words, how likely an individual will inherit a behavioral trait or psychological disorder based on their family history. Family studies are techniques used to examine patterns of a psychological disorder in members of a family. The closer the relationship between people, the more genes they share. For example, a mother and son will share 50% of their genes, whereas identical twins will share 100% of their genes. Therefore, behavioral geneticists also use adoption in twin studies to determine heritability, more specifically to study the interaction between nature and nurture, or the genes and the environment. In addition to neuroimaging and behavioral genetics, the cellular level of research also explores the role of neurotransmitters in abnormal behavior. This photo is of a synapse, where a sending neuron meets with a receiving neuron. Neurotransmitters are released in the synapse and bind to the appropriate receptors to continue neuronal communication. For instance, high levels of dopamine are associated with schizophrenia. Likewise, serotonin appears to play a role in depression and GABA in anxiety. Research at the individual level focuses on a single individual, family, or small group. When first learning about behavior that seemed out of place or unexpected, early researchers would gather valuable and detailed information from a single person or a group of people who shared similar instances of abnormal behavior. This information would then serve as the foundation of further exploration of psychological disorders. The first research method is known as a case study. A case study provides a detailed narrative of abnormal behavior and/or its treatment of a single individual, family, or small group of people. This photo is of Dr. Ellen Sachs, who is a professor of law, psychology, and psychiatry at the University of Southern California Law School. Since the age of 8 years old, Dr. Sachs has experienced the symptoms of schizophrenia. While she had several mental health episodes occur during her graduate studies at Oxford and Yale, she did not share her diagnosis with anyone but her own doctors. Finally, in 2007, as a noted academic and professor, she published her autobiography that served to document her life with schizophrenia, and in essence served as a case study of how schizophrenia exists in a single individual. In addition to the numerous benefits of a detailed narrative of a psychological disorder, we would be remiss to not discuss its limitations. Case studies are not representative of every person that may have experienced that specific psychological disorder, and therefore the results are not generalizable. The second research method is a single case design. This technique involves studying how a single individual responds before and after treatment of a psychological disorder. In essence, single case designs are controlled experiments conducted on one person. The most common research design is called ABAB research design. A stands for the baseline phase, where no treatment or no intervention takes place. B stands for the treatment phase, where the treatment or intervention is applied. This photo is an example of the ABAB design. For example, let's assume we want to study an individual with depression and how their experience with depression impacts their contact with friends. The first phase A will be measured how many times the person contacts their friends, which in this case appears really low. The first phase B will be applying the treatment of cognitive behavioral therapy to help improve the symptoms of depression. And at this phase, we measure an increase in contacting their friends with their treatment. The second phase A is when we stop treatment or stop CBT, and then we measure how well the individual continues to contact friends, which starts out high but slowly decreases. The second phase B, which is not shown in this video, is when we restart the treatment or restart CBT, and again we see a sustained increase in contacting friends. Research at the group level includes the most common methods to study abnormal behavior. Here, researchers will recruit a large group of people to participate in an experiment or study to draw conclusions based on all participants. The first research method is correlation. This method studies the relationships between different variables to describe and predict abnormal behavior. In a correlational study, no variables are manipulated by the researcher. Rather, variables are measured as they occur naturally in the environment. Wang et al. Conducted a study where they asked 120 participants to carry a smartphone with a metadata collection app for more than 1 month. At the end of 1 month, participants completed several questionnaires, including a depression scale. The researchers found a relationship between depression and social behavior on participants' smartphones. Individuals who reported being depressed received less calls from their social contacts than individuals who were not depressed. Additionally, the researchers discovered that using social apps during the evening predicted higher depressive symptoms. While there appears to be a strong relationship between depression and using social apps, it does not mean that using social apps in the evening causes depression. In other words, correlation is not causation. Now, if you want to determine causation, the research method to use is experiments. Experiments involve the manipulation of one variable to measure the effect in another variable. In this case, the researcher manipulates the independent variable to see what impact it has on the dependent variable. As such, an experiment is the only method to determine cause and effect relationships. Key features of experiments include ensuring random assignment to control and experimental groups, and that the sample is representative of the general population. Clinical trials for new medications are examples of experiments. To avoid bias in a clinical trial, a researcher may use a double-blind study, where only one person knows which participant group has received the medication and which group has not. And as such, the remaining researchers are kept blind, get it, blind to the participants' group assignment. The fourth and final level of research is population. At this level, the researchers want a global understanding of the occurrence of a psychological disorder. In other words, how often does this abnormal behavior or disorder occur across the entire population? The main method of assessing abnormal behavior at the population level is called epidemiology. Epidemiological research studies the occurrence of psychological disorders by time, place, and persons. This photo highlights the two key concepts of prevalence and incidence. Prevalence is the filled bathtub, or the total number of cases in a given population. Incidence is the fresh water coming from the faucet, or the number of new cases that emerge in a given population. For example, the World Health Organization in 2022 stated that the worldwide prevalence rate of schizophrenia is 0.32%, or 1 in 300 people. And according to the Global Burden of Disease study in 2017, the global incidence rate of schizophrenia is increasing, with 1.13 million new cases of schizophrenia in 2017 alone. Information about prevalence and incidence of a psychological disorder can be useful for health services planning in any country. In summary, there are 4 levels of research methods, and each research method is an important first step in understanding and helping our clients.